Gordon got into a car accident and fell into a coma when he was preparing to divorce me for his junior high school sister. But his soul has always been trapped by my side, and I pretended not to see. The doctor said he might never wake up. His junior high school sister quickly announced her relationship with someone else, distancing herself from the situation. Later, when Gordon woke up, she rushed back to him, tearfully saying in Gordon's calm gaze, "Gordon, I've been waiting for you for so long, and you finally woke up." Chapter 1. I looked at Gordon in the ICU, unconscious and covered in tubes, a sense of bitter satisfaction rising uncontrollably in my heart. You see, this is the retribution that those who betray true feelings receive. The doctor said he suffered severe brain injuries, and the chances of waking up were less than 5%. His junior high school sister, Penny, upon hearing the news, came to the hospital, glanced disapprovingly, and coldly left a remark. "I hope you recover soon." She never visited again after that. She probably forgot that Gordon had the accident for her sake. 6 months ago, on the day before Gordon was going to divorce me, because of Penny's craving for wontons from the old street in the south of the city, Gordon, disregarding the stormy weather, went to buy them for her and ended up in a series of car accidents, bringing a steaming bowl of wontons. When I received the call to rush to the hospital, all I faced were thin sheets of critical condition notices. No one could understand my emotions at that moment, hoping darkly that he would just die like that, yet also cruelly thinking that dying like this was too good for him. I didn't know what outcome I wanted. I just wished that he would experience all the pain I had endured. But now, he lay in a coma in the hospital, turned into a vegetable. And his beloved Penny no longer wanted him. In fact, when I coincidentally met Penny at a restaurant, I kindly reminded her. The doctor said that if the person who is important to him spends more time with him, talks to him more, maybe the chances of waking up will be higher. She smiled indifferently. What does that have to do with me? Why should I waste my prime years on a vegetable who has nothing to do with me? Sheila, you are his wife, you should be the one to accompany him. Nothing to do with me. I silently repeated these 4 words, feeling the extreme irony. She didn't say it was nothing to do with her when she asked Gordon to leave me, running a fever of 40 degrees, to celebrate her birthday. She didn't say it was nothing to do with her when she needed Gordon to divorce me and be with her. But when Gordon became a vegetable due to an accident for her and needed her companionship and care, she said it was nothing to do with her. I calmly looked at her. Penny, don't forget, he became like this because he went to buy that bowl of wontons for you. Upon hearing her words, she instantly became angry and retorted loudly. Did I force him with a knife and a gun to go buy it? Clearly, he wanted to help me buy it on his own accord, had a stroke of bad luck with the accident, turned into a vegetable on the brink of death. Don't even think about pinning this on me. I fell silent and watched her hurriedly leaving figure, as if evading misfortune. Of course, why would Penny want to wait for a vegetable who might never wake up? I tilted my head slightly, my gaze seemingly casual, brushing past the soul that had followed me for so long. An expression of disbelief, a tightly furrowed brow. He must be feeling quite uncomfortable now. Chapter 2. Gordon had no idea that I could see him. It was in the 2nd week after the accident. I accidentally fell asleep in the study while working, and the night breeze blowing in from the open window startled me awake. In my hazy vision, I saw Gordon leisurely leaning against the wooden bookshelf filled with books, with a white curtain occasionally brushing past him. The drowsiness instantly dissipated. I even forgot to react, maintaining the posture of half-open eyes on the table for a long time before I called the hospital. The message I received was, "Gordon is fine today, the situation hasn't worsened, but there are no signs of him waking up either." After calmly hanging up the phone, I blinked and then noticed that his entire body was slightly transparent. So I got up and walked on the soft carpet, slowly approaching him. I pretended not to see anything, reached through his body, and took a book from the second shelf of the bookcase. As I walked back to my seat, holding the book, my emotions underwent a drastic change from shock to surprise, and then to a calm overturning. Gordon's soul, detached from his body, was trapped by my side. Not only that, I could also hear his voice. Because when I picked up the divorce agreement prepared by his lawyer, I heard him sneer. "Sheila, you must be very happy now, right? I'm unconscious and can't divorce you, just as you wished." He said as I wished. He thought I was unwilling to let go, holding on stubbornly until he agreed to the divorce. In reality, I had truly intended to give up on him. Am I happy? Not happy. I wanted to make him unhappy too. So I made him hear with his own ears how Penny distanced herself from him. At the end of the corridor, the soft footsteps of a nurse echoed. I silently walked into the ICU and approached him. I had to admit, even in just a patient gown, with tousled hair and a pale, sickly complexion, lying on the bed, Gordon still looked very handsome. The thick, curly eyelashes cast a shadow below his eyelids. Under the high bridge of his nose were perfectly thin lips, and his well-defined facial features appeared more profound and handsome due to his unconscious state. But I liked Gordon, being with him was never about his face. After all, I still understand the principle that the more beautiful something is, the more dangerous it is. So when we met for the first time as bridesmaid and groomsman at the same wedding, I immediately classified him as a dangerous item. Apart from politely handing him a tissue when he was splashed with alcohol, I didn't have much contact with him. But fate had other plans. Soon we met for the second time. Because one evening while jogging in the park, I coincidentally saved a fainting elderly person. Gordon's grandmother. From the moment Gordon invited me to dinner to express his gratitude, our meetings became more frequent. Being trapped in the office building during rain, I would coincidentally run into Gordon passing by, who would then give me a ride back home. Attending an event that my friend dragged me to during the holidays turned out to be Gordon's birthday party. Facing the lit candles, he made a wish for peace every year. Coincidences piled up, and I sensed something was amiss. So I started to deliberately avoid him. But Gordon not only didn't mind my distance, he instead pressed on step by step, until I asked him in fear, with no way out, what he wanted. He then smiled with his eyes and gently asked me. "Classmate Sheila, I'm pursuing you, can't you feel it?" Chapter 3. I don't know why Gordon would like me. But since then, he no longer carefully concealed it and instead launched a fierce attack on me directly. I resisted his advances, trying to guard my heart. But at that time, Gordon, handsome and mature, humorous, successful in his career, was still the caring and gentle type who focused solely on you. To be honest, for me, freshly graduated and entering the workforce, it was almost impossible to remain indifferent. Surrender was just a matter of time. The moment I agreed to be with him was on Valentine's Day night. I had drunk a lot to close a deal, but he persistently teased me, lightly pressing the glass against my chest, saying, "Young people are great, Sheila, do you have a boyfriend?" Before I could react to the discomfort, the door of the private room was forcefully pushed open, and Gordon, with a dark face, walked in and grabbed the wrist of the other person, breaking the glass. He coldly said, "Now she does." It wasn't until Gordon dragged me to the street that I realized what he had just said, my thoughts spinning. I finally asked. "Inside." "Someone will take care of it, don't worry." I nodded, guessing that a colleague around me saw Gordon's true identity, got bribed, and leaked information to him. In the romantic shimmering night, Gordon took off his coat and draped it over me, not mentioning the recent unpleasant incident. Encountering such situations in the workplace is actually quite common. When you can't resist, you can only choose to endure silently, maybe go back and cry for a while on your own. Besides, I had already gotten used to being unfairly treated. But Gordon stood in front of me in an absolutely domineering manner, making me feel protected for the first time. When people are at their most vulnerable, they fear comfort the most. The passing couples on the roadside broke my silence. Gordon's tone was casual, almost as if he was asking me out for dinner, when he asked me, "Classmate Sheila, would you like to spend Valentine's Day together?" To this day, I still remember the trembling of that seedling breaking through the soil in my heart, as I looked into his serious eyes and decided in agreement. It was him. So I pointed to a cart selling roses on the roadside. "Can I have a rose?" He paused for a second, then suddenly smiled, turning back to buy all the roses from the cart. He returned to tell me, Now, they're all yours. From now on, there will always be more. Back then, I was too naive and foolish, thinking that this from now on meant forever, until Penny returned to the country, and I realized that the deadline for from now on was before she appeared. After Penny appeared, all promises and vows turned into jokes. I have seen countless answers online regarding how strong the impact of first love is, but the detailed descriptions of 1,000 answers cannot compare to the look Gordon gave Penny. In a cliché story, Penny was Gordon's unattainable first love. After she chose to be with another man and went abroad, Gordon never forgot about her. And I was just a pawn in his life's path. Gordon had only one relative, his grandmother. Initially, she fainted due to stomach cancer, and the only thing she worried about in her life was Gordon, hoping to see him settled down. I was merely the tool Gordon chose to bring her peace of mind. Chapter 4. But Gordon's grandmother really liked me and treated me well. The love I felt from Gordon was an illusion, but the affection his grandmother showed me was genuine. She would make my favorite osmanthus cake for me, prepare clothes for all seasons in advance, and when Gordon and I had conflicts, she unreasonably sided with me, using her cane to knock on Gordon. What could be wrong with Sheila? All the wrongs are because of you, you little rascal. Even before she passed away, she said to me. Marrying this little rascal is you being wronged, Sheila. As long as you two are well, I will be at ease. At that time, with red eyes, Gordon tightly held my hand, promising. We will, definitely. Then, at a gathering 8 months after his grandmother's passing, he reunited with Penny, who had broken up and returned home. I sensed something was wrong because of a small incident. During dinner that evening, I mentioned the sudden downpour after a rainy day, where a double rainbow appeared in the sky, photos of which were being shared on social media. It was said that a double rainbow symbolizes good fortune. After I finished speaking, I asked him if he had seen it. He didn't answer, lost in thought. A few seconds later, he noticed me pausing with my cutlery and looking at him quietly. He gently smiled and asked me. Sheila, what did you just say? I say unimportant things. Back when I was studying, whenever I encountered multiple choice questions I didn't know, I could rely on my intuition to accurately guess the correct answer. I never expected that this skill I once prided myself on would one day be used on Gordon. Almost uncontrollably, I guessed that the few seconds Gordon was distracted were because of a woman. And I was right, it was Penny. She was 3 years younger than Gordon and his junior schoolmate. At that time, Gordon wasn't as successful as he later became, and with just her face, he truly couldn't beat the competition who also liked Penny and were handsome and wealthy. So, without a doubt, he lost. But he probably didn't expect that one day Penny would break up and return to the country, while he had already become successful. It seemed like everything was just right, and the past separations were just to later reunite at the best time. I didn't know how much Gordon loved Penny to successfully pull him away from me time and time again, not caring about his status as a married man. Her light-hearted desire to be with Gordon was enough to ruin my marriage, to ruin me. From initial doubts, to later questioning, to the final pleading and hysteria, Gordon pushed me away with disgust. Sheila, you look really disgusting now. That night, I stood on the balcony all night, my tears dried by the wind repeatedly, trying to understand one thing. Gordon was right, I was disgusted with myself like this. So I gave up. When Gordon mentioned divorce to me again, I asked him. In these 4 years together, was there ever a moment when you were sincere? He impatiently avoided my gaze and said no. I lowered my head in silence for a few seconds and calmly agreed to the divorce. He seemed somewhat surprised, looking at me cautiously, asking. What trick do you have this time? Yes, several times before, I had delayed the deadline by suddenly falling ill or the car breaking down, continuously postponing. The only time I truly wanted to divorce him, he was in a car accident and fell into a coma because of Penny. And then, Penny not only decisively abandoned him, but also turned around and got back together with her ex. Chapter 5. I heard that the reason Penny broke up and returned to the country was because her rich second-generation boyfriend and her first love had an ambiguous relationship. After multiple disputes, they broke up. The worst part of human nature lies in not forgetting what they can't have and regretting what they have lost. So when Penny returned to the country and contacted Gordon, appearing in the same places time and time again, getting closer step by step, the rich second generation also came back to find her. It's hard to say if there was any possibility that Penny, in her interactions with Gordon, was intentionally provoking the rich second generation. After all, Gordon was once his biggest competitor. And during the time when Gordon wanted to divorce me for Penny, it was also the time when the rich second generation regretted the most and did many romantic and extreme things. Apologizing with a drone, proposing in a sea of flowers, self-harm after drinking. Penny watched quietly, continued to be with Gordon, and then shortly after he fell into a coma from the car accident. When the rich second generation once again spent a lot of money to apologize and confess his feelings, she agreed to reconcile. No one knew what role Gordon played between them, but the rich second generation did visit Gordon in the hospital once and said with relief, "Although it may not be right to think like this, I am very grateful for that car accident that night, Gordon, this time I won again." At that moment, Gordon was behind him, staring at him with a dark expression, but couldn't do anything because of his ghostly state. From the moment Penny distanced herself, to witnessing her return and reconciliation, Gordon was initially in disbelief, then began to rage uncontrollably, and ultimately had to accept everything. I calmly and joyfully appreciated every bit of his pain, watching him quietly following me, feeling quite ironic. He once wanted to cut ties with me so badly, didn't want to see me again, but in the end, had to be forced to be with me every day. Just like when we were in love, we shared everything we did each day without reservation, letting each other know our whereabouts. Now, he had to go to work, attend gatherings, go shopping with me every day, and plan where to travel. Over time, I started to hear his resentful voice. "I'm still in a coma, and you're in the mood to go on vacation? Do you have a heart at all? Don't you care if I live or die? Sheila, did lying down too long make you forget that you're married? Stay away from that man." The man he referred to was an intern I brought in, named Matthew. Among all the interns I brought in, he was the only one who didn't call me Sheila's sister, but directly addressed me by my first and last name, Sheila. He was also the most outstanding in terms of ability among the group. I didn't really care about how they addressed me, and Matthew's deep and clear voice didn't make me feel offended when he called me Sheila. But Gordon didn't see it that way. Whenever Matthew appeared by my side, he would display a side of him I had never seen before, angrily shouting, "Sheila, are you blind? Can't you see his intentions are not pure?" Upon hearing this, I would look up at the clean, polite, and meticulously buttoned-up Matthew, feeling puzzled. "Gordon, what's the rush?" Chapter 6. Of course, I am no longer an inexperienced young girl, nor am I blind. I definitely could not fail to see what Matthew was thinking. He liked me. Matthew's appearance was the trendy sunshine boy look that many girls like these days, but his personality was a stark contrast, calm, restrained, rational, and sensible. Since I got to know him, I had hardly seen him lose control of his emotions. Even when a colleague accidentally deleted the data he had worked hard on, he could calmly finish his breakfast, then select the quickest method to recover it, or redo it, without rushing. After solving the problem, he would then say to the worried colleague with a face full of apologies, "It's all right now, just be more careful next time." The only time I saw a panicked expression on his face was when we were discussing a collaboration project together. After it ended, he went to drive, and I rested in the compartment for a while before getting ready to find him. However, halfway there, we encountered a drunkard who dragged me into another compartment and attempted to take advantage of me under the influence of alcohol. Honestly, if it had been back when I had just graduated, I would have definitely been scared out of my wits, then struggled to break free and scream. But I wasn't that person anymore, so I took the opportunity, and as he was about to touch me, I grabbed a nearby wine bottle and smashed it hard on his head. Then I called the manager, the police, checked the surveillance footage, and verified everything. When Matthew found me, his usually neat and tidy shirt was rare to have some dust on it, but he hadn't noticed yet. He just looked at my hand, which was bleeding from the shards, and apologized breathlessly. "Sorry, I'm late." I smiled slightly at him. "Not late, just in time." Later, he bought some medicine to bandage my wound, and as he drove me back home, I casually said while looking out the window, "Matthew, I'm already married." He showed no surprise and casually replied while looking ahead,
Yeah.
"I know, but I heard that you're getting a divorce." These two sentences were the only time we talked about personal matters since we met, and everything said was factual, with no overstepping boundaries. So Gordon's anger puzzled me. I clearly hadn't done anything, and he clearly didn't love me, so why was he getting upset? But that didn't matter because any of his emotions, including himself, would no longer affect me. I continued to maintain a normal colleague relationship with Matthew. Until today, during the company's team-building mountain climbing activity, I accidentally slipped on the steps slope. Matthew reacted quickly, grabbing me and rolling down together to protect me. I was fine, with just a slight graze on my cheek. However, Matthew had different degrees of bruises on his arms and legs from protecting me. I went to the hospital with the ambulance, anxiously waited for his examination results. And when I heard the doctor say he was fine and just needed rest at home, I received a call from Gordon's attending doctor. It was also at this moment that I suddenly realized that Gordon, who had been anxiously and urgently calling out as Sheila behind me all this time, was nowhere to be seen. At the same time, the doctor's voice came from the phone. "When we examined Gordon just now, we found that his condition is improving, showing signs of waking up." I stood still for a moment holding the hung-up phone, then went to the ICU, standing in front of Gordon who was still asleep with closed eyes. I chuckled mockingly. Even with less than a 5% chance, can he wake up? Chapter 7. I don't know if Gordon will wake up, but half a month after I left the hospital that day, I heard another piece of news. Penny broke up again. A long time ago, I once read a saying. Cheating is either 0 times or countless times. So, her rich second-generation boyfriend, after reuniting with her shortly, got entangled with an unknown little internet celebrity and wanted to break up with her. This didn't surprise me. What really surprised me was Penny's change. Gone was the graceful and aloof goddess image she used to have. In the vast shopping mall, she didn't care about her image at all, ranting loudly while begging desperately. I watched from afar, feeling very familiar with that scene. That used to be me. Back then, I held onto Gordon tightly and refused to let go, just like a crazy person. One of the most memorable times was on my birthday. I saw him and Penny happily chatting together in the cafe, discussing a business trip. At that moment, it felt like I was drenched in ice-cold water from head to toe, while my heart was being roasted on a hot fire, so I rushed over and swept everything off the table in front of them. Gordon immediately stood up and angrily questioned me. "Sheila, have you gone mad?" Penny smiled elegantly and looked at Gordon. "Why did you marry a woman like her, Gordon?" Completely losing my composure, I slapped her. "Then why don't you marry this home-wrecking third party?" And without hesitation, Gordon raised his hand and slapped me back. A metallic sweetness lingered between our lips. That night, for the first time, he brought up the topic of divorce. "Sheila, let's get a divorce." I truly loved Gordon back then. Even though my rational mind told me to let go, emotionally, I was unwilling to, reluctant to, and didn't want to make it easy for them. So, in the end, I ended up hurting myself. And now, Penny is experiencing the pain I went through back then. As for her ability to leave immediately after the last breakup but making a completely opposite choice this time, it made me wonder if it was because her retreat, her confidence, her tool to provoke the rich second generation, Gordon, was now in a coma and couldn't wake up. The drama continued. As I stirred my coffee, planning to look away, I unintentionally caught a glimpse of a faint figure in the corner of the crowd, calmly watching the hysterical Penny. It was Gordon. After many days, his soul appeared again. But this time, he wasn't trapped by my side and couldn't get close to me anymore. 3 meters apart, that was the closest position he could get to me. I thought that once he gained his freedom, he wouldn't follow me anymore. However, every morning after that, as I left for work, I could see him standing quietly under a ginkgo tree near the gate of the community. The moment he saw me, he subconsciously walked towards me, only to be pulled back as if by a strong force. Every time he would walk towards me. Every time he would be pulled back. I didn't know if wandering like a lonely ghost in this world, he also hoped that someone could see him. But one evening, as I came out of the dessert shop, I smiled and glanced in his direction. After a brief pause, he seemed slightly excited, moved his lips, probably calling out Sheila. Then I walked forward step by step, carrying a delicately packaged small cake, watching as he had to step back step by step. Until I stopped in front of him. He saw Matthew passing through his body and walking towards me. Chapter 8. Since the accident, Matthew had been recovering at home. During that time, I visited him once with flowers and fruit, took care of all medical expenses, and hired a nurse. He didn't refuse, only looking into my eyes when I asked him what else he needed, saying, "My birthday is a month from now." Now that he had recovered and it happened to be his birthday, I carried the cake and fulfilled my promise accurately. Celebrating his birthday. Matthew led me to the parking lot, and Gordon probably figured out what we were going to do. Through the crowd coming and going, he shouted at me. "Sheila, you can't go. Come back, Sheila, come back." Without hesitation, I got into the car, looking at Gordon's distraught face in the rearview mirror, feeling a bit dazed, remembering a small incident. Not long after I started dating Gordon, I switched to another company. One night when I needed to work overtime, I told Gordon not to pick me up. After work, a colleague offered to give me a ride. However, just as I got into the car, Gordon called. Over the phone, his voice carried a faint smile, tinged with helplessness and indulgence. "Sheila, I've been waiting for you downstairs for 3 hours. Are you really going to leave me here like this?" In shock, I saw Gordon's figure in the rearview mirror. I immediately got out of the car and ran towards him, throwing myself into his arms, asking him, "Why didn't you call me? Waiting here alone." He affectionately rubbed my head and smiled, saying, "Of course, I didn't want to disturb my dear girlfriend at work." As my thoughts returned, Gordon's faint figure in the rearview mirror became smaller and smaller until it turned into a black dot. I heard Matthew asking me, "What are you looking at?" I jokingly replied, "Watching a comedy." 15 minutes later, we arrived at the reserved restaurant. Although it was his birthday, Matthew ordered food according to my taste. I calmly shifted my gaze to the cake, opened the packaging, and instantly a sweet orange scent filled the air. After lighting the candles, I held up the cake, smilingly congratulating him. "Happy birthday. Matthew, make a wish." The restaurant's unique lighting was soft and dim. Through the flickering candlelight, his face was somewhat indistinct, but I knew he was earnestly looking at me. He closed his eyes and made a wish. "I hope I won't be late again." I couldn't help but laugh, setting down the cake and raising my glass to toast him. "Then I wish your wish comes true." Later, when we were slightly drunk, we strolled along the riverbank, where the river reflected the brilliant lights. I gazed quietly for a while, then sighed and brought up personal matters with Matthew for the second time. I candidly told him, "Matthew, even though I am getting a divorce, you also know that he got into a coma after the accident." The night wind gently swayed his bangs in front of his forehead. He didn't seem to care about the implications of my words, casually leaning his forearm on the railing by the shore, turning to look at me, and straightforwardly saying, "Divorce and widowhood will always have a result." Just at the moment he said this, I was astonished to spot Gordon's figure not far away. I wondered if the evening breeze carried those words to his ears. My gaze shifted, and I saw him silently staring at me. Then, he seemed to chuckle self-deprecatingly and slowly faded away in the wind. 3 days later, I received the outcome. Gordon woke up. Chapter 9. Penny was the first to rush to the hospital before me. In the quiet and cold hospital room, she tearfully looked at Gordon with misty eyes as he gazed back at her calmly. "I've been waiting for you for so long, Gordon. You've finally woken up." I didn't know how she got the news that Gordon had woken up, and I had no interest in her sincere and heartfelt grievances. Passing over Gordon's eyes, which had been fixed on me ever since I appeared, I turned to the doctor standing beside me and asked, "When can he be discharged?" the doctor cautiously explained. Gordon just woke up. He needs to stay in the hospital for observation for a while, undergo rehabilitation training. If there's anything urgent. I politely smiled. There's nothing urgent, just need to go through a divorce. As soon as I finished speaking, I heard a loud crash. Gordon knocked the glass of water from Penny's hand. She looked at me with an incredulous expression, and he stared at me intensely, eyes red with what seemed like anger. Sheila, I've just woken up, and you can't wait to divorce me without even asking a question? You see, his specialty was always twisting the truth, distorting facts. Obviously, he had used all means to force me into a divorce, yet now he was blaming me for wanting a divorce. Before I could respond, I heard Penny's trembling voice, filled with confusion and a slight tremor. Gordon? The hospital room fell into silence. I calmly glanced at the shattered glass on the floor, ignored Gordon's angry gaze, turned decisively, and left with just one remark. Let me know when you're discharged so we can get divorced. After that, I never visited the hospital again, but I heard that Penny went there every day. I didn't know what she was doing, and I didn't care. Unfortunately, every 2 to 3 days, I would receive a call from the hospital, updating me on Gordon's recovery progress. I am not sure if it is really necessary to report to the family, but I don't want to know, so when they called again, I politely refused. He's an adult and doesn't need to tell me everything. If it's not about him being dead next time, don't call me again. Just before hanging up, I heard a crash on the other end, the sound of glass shattering on the floor, followed by Penny's exclamation. I saw Gordon again 2 months later, in the evening. He was discharged. Since my car was at the car wash, Matthew, who was working late with me, dropped me off at the entrance of the community. As I watched his car drive away, I heard an angry voice behind me. Sheila. The smile on my lips froze, and I turned to look. It was Gordon. His face was a bit pale, he had lost a lot of weight, his thin shirt billowing in the night breeze, and the street lamp casting a long shadow of him. I stood still, unmoving, watching him stride towards me. Then he coldly questioned me. It's so late, where are you coming from? I couldn't be bothered, furrowed my brows and turned away. If it's not about the divorce, I don't think we have anything to talk about. I was stopped after just 2 steps. Veins bulged on Gordon's forehead as he gritted his teeth, speaking to me with each word punctuated. Sheila, don't forget, we're not divorced yet. I almost immediately understood what he meant, feeling the extreme irony of it. I couldn't help but let out a soft laugh and asked him gently. Gordon, that marriage certificate, it couldn't hold you back before. Do you think it can hold me back now? Chapter 10. Penny approached me a month after Gordon was discharged. Since Gordon woke up from the coma, his attitude towards Penny had done a complete 180-degree turn. So much so that even the nurses in the hospital could sense Gordon's indifference towards Penny. After his discharge, Gordon used the excuse of needing to handle work to avoid meeting her, then he began appearing outside my company, near the entrance of the community, every day. Because he didn't want a divorce. So, the first thing Penny said to me when she approached was, Sheila, are you doing this on purpose? Engaging in ambiguous relationships with other men just to provoke Gordon, trying to make him win you back. I had just come out of a restaurant, her words amusing me. Holding a coffee in one hand, I pushed my slightly curled hair behind my shoulder, looked down at her with a calm expression, and spoke. Yes, that's right, just as you think. Sheila, you. I wasn't interested in listening to her baseless accusations. Stepping around her in high heels and walking through the company's entrance, I turned around to see her persistently trying to follow, only to be stopped by the security guard. Facing the guard's hesitant inquiry. Sheila, the director, she is. I smiled and said. Busybody. After that, I didn't see Penny again, but I heard that after Gordon repeatedly ignored her, Penny couldn't take it anymore and coldly told him. Gordon, you better not regret it. I won't give you another chance. Not long after, she got together with a vice president from their company who had a good impression of her. Obviously, Penny's harsh words didn't affect Gordon at all, as he continued to find various reasons to see me, insisting. Sheila, I'm not getting a divorce. I just felt it was ironic and ridiculous. Back when he tried everything to force me into a divorce, he probably never thought that one day our roles would reverse, and the one speaking those words would be him. I even heard him softly and gently say to me, "Sheila, can we start over?" He said start over. He wanted me to pretend that Penny never existed, that he never hurt me, that nothing ever happened, and then be with him again without any hard feelings, loving him as before. I was somewhat helpless, more confused, and finally gave him only one response. How could I have married someone like you, Gordon? Perhaps that struck a nerve with him, as he immediately became angry and loudly retorted. Then who do you want to marry? That in turn. After that, he asked me again. Sheila, have you had enough yet? Yes, he wanted a divorce to pursue true love, while my wish for a divorce was just being unreasonable. In fact, since I had given up on him long ago, I hadn't been angry for a long time. My career was going well, friends were by my side, life was comfortable, and it seemed like there was nothing worth getting upset over. Until this moment, my emotions were stirred again, and words were not enough to vent my frustration, so without hesitation, I raised my hand and slapped him hard. A smack followed by silence. Gordon's face was turned to the side from the slap, maintaining that position for a while before he touched his cheek and chuckled. I've returned the slap you owed me, are you satisfied? I know you allowed him to get close just to retaliate against me. Sheila, you've achieved your goal. Chapter 11. I do not deny that I was somewhat attracted to Matthew. The reason was simple. Once, I was troubled by a tricky project for a long time, sitting alone on a bench in the square, lost in thought in the evening. Around me were various cheerful noises, colorful balloons and bubbles floating around, but none of it concerned me. In that scene, a teddy bear with a balloon in hand walked through the crowd and tied the balloon to my wrist, then proceeded to do a bunny dance for me. To be honest, the dancing wasn't perfect, but it still made me laugh. I leaned back slightly, teasingly looking at him and said, "Dressed in a teddy bear costume, doing the bunny dance, Matthew, you really have a unique style." He took a few steps closer, removed the headpiece, revealing a slightly red handsome face, his temples damp with sweat, but his clear, bright eyes fixed on my face as he said, "It doesn't matter what I wear or what I dance, Sheila, what matters is that you smiled." Yes, I smiled. So, the reason was just that simple, he made me happy. Later, I squinted and looked at him carefully for a moment, then asked. The last time the teddy bear appeared in front of me, it was also you, right? It was that night of the first argument between Gordon and me because of Penny. I was sitting by the glass wall in the cafe, feeling down, when a teddy bear walked towards me and performed a magic trick through the glass. At that time, Matthew hadn't joined the company yet, so I didn't know who was under the headpiece. I only remembered that after I wrote "thank you" with lipstick on a tissue, he quietly looked at me for a few seconds, then slowly turned and walked into the crowd. Not long after, in front of the interns at the company, I heard his self-introduction. "Hello, my name is Matthew." Unlike the previous time, this time, after dancing, Matthew took off the headpiece and stood in front of me. After looking at me for a while, he softly said, "Do you remember me?" I tugged at the balloon on my wrist and blinked. Of course, I remember you. Compared to the intense emotions Gordon brought me, Matthew's feelings were like a cup of warm tea, not very exciting but also wouldn't make one lose themselves, calm and gentle. Moreover, due to a failed relationship, I wasn't willing to cut off love completely. That would seem too important compared to Gordon's short 4 years against my long life. So, I didn't resist the feelings for Matthew. After all, love isn't wrong, people are. Gordon was just a mistake I encountered in my life, and once I let go, everything thereafter had nothing to do with him. I wouldn't use a genuine feeling to seek revenge on him. Therefore, in response to Gordon's overly confident question, I just lightly shook my head and mockingly looked at him. "You think too highly of yourself, Gordon." His face paled slightly the moment I finished speaking. He opened his mouth, his voice trembling and hoarse. "Sheila, I know it was all my fault before, my obsession hurt you deeply. But now I know I was wrong, I understand that you are the one I truly love. So, I won't get a divorce. Facing his paranoid appearance, I smiled lightly and said, "If that's the case, Gordon, then you can also experience what it feels like to love someone but think of another man day and night." The dagger he once thrust towards me ultimately ended up piercing himself. Chapter 12. Gordon said I was the one he truly loved. To be honest, when I heard those words, my heart didn't flutter at all. In fact, I felt like laughing a little. If I had to pay the price of being deeply hurt just to make him realize who truly loves him, then this kind of love would be an insult to me. Moreover, this was built on the foundation of Penny deceiving him and abandoning him, which made him feel regretful. After that, Gordon continued to pester me for a long time. I didn't deliberately avoid him, nor did I angrily tell him to go away. Late at night, under the company building, at the entrance of the rainy neighborhood, he was willing to stand there, willing to wait. After all, apart from using such a despicable way of pestering, he could no longer interfere in my life. Even though we still had a marital relationship. When he came to me again and asked me this question, "Sheila, you don't really love me that much, right?" I didn't know what kind of mood he was in when he said this. I looked up and carefully examined his expressions, then I asked him, "Gordon, do you remember that summer in our second year of marriage? It was that summer evening with the continuous cicada cries, when we were having a barbecue at an outdoor restaurant. We encountered a group of rowdy people drinking, and in the chaos, I shielded Gordon from a half-broken bottle that was thrust towards him. The flimsy chiffon skirt instantly tore, and the blood flowing from the wound on my waist stained a large part of Gordon's white shirt red. When I woke up in the hospital ward, I saw Gordon sitting by my bed, disheveled, with red eyes, holding my hand and hoarsely saying, "Sheila, please don't do this. I can't bear to see you hurt." At that moment, I weakly smiled at him. "Don't worry, it's not that painful." Indeed, it wasn't very painful, nothing compared to the pain he caused me later. As we reminisced in silence, neither of us spoke. I could hear his trembling breath, and finally, I sighed helplessly. "Gordon, for years ago, no one could compare to you in my heart." After a long time, he seemed to speak with some difficulty, his voice hoarse and dry. "And now? Now, am I no longer able to compete with him in your heart?" I looked at him seriously and shook my head. "No, Gordon, you're no longer in my heart." Perhaps it had finally come to a dead end. He showed a touch of bitter smile and began to play the family card. "But Sheila, you promised Grandma that you would be with me." I felt a bit tired, remaining silent, not saying anything, just opening my phone to show him a photo. It was a letter left to me by my grandmother. The gist of it was, if Gordon treated me badly, I didn't need to have any scruples, I could leave him without looking back. I had thought that this letter would never come in handy, but I didn't expect it to be used twice. The first time, I didn't listen in time and tangled with him for a long time. The second time was now. Outside the window, it started drizzling at some point, and the gloomy dusk descended. Veins slightly bulging on Gordon's forehead, he ultimately didn't say a word and turned to leave. Hastily walking away, his figure looked disheveled. Chapter 13. Long ago, I had imagined that if Gordon forced me to divorce, I would look at his bright appearance with pain and hatred, then say, "Gordon, I will never forgive you for the rest of my life." Now that this day had truly arrived, my emotions were surprisingly calm. When we met at the Civil Affairs Bureau, Gordon did look a lot more haggard. I heard that after getting caught in a heavy rain that day, he developed a persistent fever and had to be taken to the hospital by an ambulance. Perhaps the car accident had really taken a toll on his body. A friend couldn't help but chuckle over the phone. After effects of the accident are showing up. Who knows how long he'll live? He deserves this for cheating within the marriage and betraying true feelings. I hired the best divorce lawyer and submitted all the evidence of Gordon's infidelity, so during the property division, I didn't give up a single cent of what rightfully belonged to me. Throughout the process, Gordon remained silent until right before leaving. Suddenly, he spoke, as if asking me, yet also speaking to himself. If Penny hadn't come back, could we have spent the rest of our lives together? If Penny hadn't returned, perhaps his deception towards me would never have been exposed, but his unfulfilled love for his first love would always linger in his heart. The longer the time passed, the more idealized his first love would become in his mind. One day, due to a slight conflict between us, he would start reminiscing about Penny. And in the process of silently comparing me to her, I would become the object of his disgust. I looked up at the cloudless sky and smiled faintly. Gordon, I never intended to get entangled in this whirlpool of 3 people. It was you, for your own selfish gain, who dragged me into it. Life after divorce didn't change much. I continued working, socializing, and occasionally took a few days off to travel after finishing a project. Except for one thing, Matthew and I confirmed our romantic relationship. It was 3 months after my divorce. At a friend's birthday party, I was on the terrace getting some fresh air, when a project partner walked over and offered me a drink, politely and gentlemanly asking. I found the original soundtrack CD of that old movie we talked about during our collaboration. Director Sheila, are you interested? As adults, the implication was clear to everyone. I curved my eyes, smiled, about to respond, when I heard a voice behind him. Excuse me, I was next in line. It was Matthew. Dressed in a clean and crisp black and white tracksuit, his jet black short hair highlighted his sharp features and a hint of nonchalance, standing quietly in place, gazing steadily at me. The night breeze brought an unknown floral scent. I broke the silence first, calmly looked at the drink in the partner's hand, and straightforwardly said. Sorry, I only drink warm plain water. When Gordon had finished refusing, the terrace was soon deserted, leaving only Matthew and me. I stood quietly, watching as he took off his sports jacket and draped it over my bare-shouldered dress. I tilted my face slightly upwards and calmly asked him with a smile. So, Matthew. What movie are we going to watch? He lowered his head to meet my gaze, his eyes sparkling with a particularly serious tone. Let's go watch I Love You. Chapter 14. The time spent between Matthew and me didn't have any grand or memorable scenes, but every memory felt filled with warmth and beauty. In the mornings, he brought me warm milk, always carried a hair tie for me, kept a pair of flat shoes in the car, and subtly adjusted my diet a week before my period without making a fuss. Sometimes, as I watched him earnestly blow dry my hair in the mirror, I couldn't help but recall the first evidence I noticed of his feelings. Perhaps it was in the same elevator, him standing behind me, his gaze lingering on me through the mirror. A somewhat unclear look in his eyes. Matthew's emotional maturity was evident, independent and capable. In our relationship, his efforts were visibly more than mine, and besides providing him with companionship, it seemed like I couldn't offer much else. Occasionally, I would ask him if he felt it was unfair. He calmly shook his head, sighed as he held me, his voice tinged with a hint of inexplicable grievance. I just feel like you might leave at any moment. To be honest, I had been betrayed in a past relationship, so even though I had feelings for him, I always kept a way out, not giving my full love. After a moment of silence, I could only say. It's my fault that I couldn't make you feel loved 100%. I'm sorry. At his words, he smiled as if relieved and spoke earnestly. Then I'll love you a little more, to make our love complete. I didn't know how far Matthew and I would go, but being together made me comfortable and happy, so I would cherish every day. If it works out, great. If not, that's fine too. This was the lesson I learned from my failed relationship with Gordon. I saw Gordon again in the second year after our divorce. At a welcome back party for a friend, as I was returning to the private room from the restroom. I got stuck at one end of the corridor because a crowd had gathered to watch something, blocking the way. Trying to move away from the crowd to see what was happening, I unexpectedly saw Gordon at the other end of the corridor, quietly looking at me. Casually shifting my gaze away, I just raised my head to see one of the main female characters in the commotion, who was yelling like a madwoman. It was Penny. Sometimes, one couldn't help but marvel at the miracle of fate. It brought the 3 of us together due to infidelity, and now we were colliding once again in a similar event. Initially, Penny had married the vice president shortly after they got together, but unfortunately, he cheated on her in the second year of their marriage. At that moment, I didn't know whether to sympathize with her for repeatedly experiencing infidelity or to revel in the retribution she received. But I hoped that in every painful moment, she would remember that there was someone who had also been tormented because of her. After the crowd dispersed and Gordon and I passed each other, he suddenly called out my name and then, in a hoarse voice, said, "Sorry." I stopped to look, unable to discern his expression. It seemed like sadness, guilt, and uncontrollable sorrow all at once. I wasn't interested in pondering it and replied gently, "I won't forgive you, and I hope you don't have a good life." Indeed, he wasn't doing well. It was said that due to the lingering effects of a car accident, he spent years seeking medical treatment abroad, but it was all in vain. Both physically and mentally, his condition deteriorated. Upon hearing my words, he staggered, and when Matthew called me from afar and hurried towards me, he quickly turned his back. For some reason, I felt his figure was slightly stooped and trembling silently. On the way home, feeling too tired to talk, I held Matthew's phone and absent-mindedly scrolled through it without any purpose. He probably thought that after seeing Gordon, I was reminded of unpleasant memories and felt upset. So, he placed one hand on the steering wheel and gently held my hand with the other, apologizing softly. "Sorry for being late." Just then, I unintentionally stumbled upon an old photo in his album after many years. The person in it was me. During my junior year, I had tutored a high school student in English. His parents were divorced, and he lived with his mother, who, due to her busy career, barely showed him any affection in daily life apart from matters related to his studies. He needed English tutoring, but it was more of an intentional ploy to garner his mother's attention by deliberately performing poorly. So, rather than being a tutor, my role was more about being there to accompany him. On his last class, which happened to be his birthday, unaware of his preferences, I chose an orange-flavored cake. He didn't eat much of it, and I assumed he didn't like it. However, at the end of the session, he solemnly told me, "I really liked it." That student was Matthew. The photo showed him sneaking a shot of me eating cake while propping his phone in his textbook. In fact, I had recognized him from the first moment I saw him at the company. What surprised me was that not only did he sneakily take a photo of me, but he had kept that photo for so long. My heart trembled slightly. I didn't know what his late meant, whether it referred to not coming out earlier to take me away or not finding me before Gordon hurt me. But it didn't matter. I held his hand back, smiled slightly at him, and said, "Not late, just in time." The night air was cool, the moonlight gentle, and my love by my side. Everything was just right.